episode 7, siete, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
siete
hmm
of the Solos podcast. And I just noticed that it's episode 7. And this is definitely going to be some sort of magical code that takes us through the topics today. I feel like this 7 is going to be something that ties a lot of different things together. But before we go 30 minutes in and then have to do a recap on the last episode, like we tend to do sometimes, let's be present with what came up in the last episode for a second and
Yeah.
present with just what's up with you right now. How you doing, brother?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I'm good, feeling good. Always looking forward to any discussions that you and I have, but especially ones that are, like podcast related. So I particularly remember, just first of all, your invention of a new word in last episode of perspection. So that was cool to break down and to get
Mhm.
an understanding of, the different dimensions. And I think you were using an object to, yeah, just like demonstrate how we see things differently and from different perspectives at different dimensions. And so this concept of galactic embodiment and what does that mean? I think maybe I would love to kick off with a definition of that and how we can understand that.
Mhm.
In relation to what I thought last episode was going to be about was the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood. So I think we're going to go a little bit deeper into that today.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And we had this on the list for a while, and we kind of, I think, needed to prep ourselves and our perception and everybody else's perception to be able to kind of like
Hmm.
receive this stuff, because like we're receiving a lot of it that's new to us too. We tune into it and we know it's there and we know we've had these experiences, but we're always uncovering new details with it. And I think something that was interesting that happened was we decided not to really go into the Dragon Knighthood in the last episode. And so it kind of like extended to this next episode. And in between there, Josh sent me this video about about the Freemasons and about how the rituals work for the Freemasons. And so we're going to get into all those details, but I was seeing how it would be really cool for us to bring together the Freemasons and the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood and these kind of mysterious names. Maybe you have people listening haven't even heard of the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood. That's a very new type thing, I think. And Debra, my wife, is the one who has made me aware of that, because of all the work that she does in the Akashic records and she does with the dragon. So we ended up doing this whole thing about decoding reality, and now we're kind of stepping into these groups that are well known, that have been well known as other names as well throughout time, and how they are responsible for kind of decoding reality and then kind of governing that reality in certain ways. And so we'll take slow steps into it from there.
Yeah. And maybe I have a way in that I'm making a connection to my mind. So I'll just say that out loud and then we can kind of go where we need to. But this concept that I think you just said it, that people have basically like our souls have incarnated into similar situations throughout time, throughout history, where this is playing out. So the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood is one of those time periods. And so we're in kind of that cycle right now, like we are the same version of that in this time period. And so where do the Freemasons come in? Is that a different time period? Is that the same types of people? Is that, has that been hijacked? Like how do we draw those two together?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that Atlantis has been a part of many time cycles and many planets and many star systems, throughout the human soul experience. So, um, Atlantis is not just it has not just existed on this earth before. It's existed on many earths. It's a big part of the consciousness of the human soul, and man, that frequency of the human soul manifests as the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood. And so we've now found ourselves in this conflict, which requires certain types of conflict resolution in different ways. And that's what the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood was known for. And that's also what the Freemasons are known for, but they are more notoriously known for being connected into the negative side of things. And I'll just start by saying the Freemasons are an inverted um, breakaway group that was originally part of the same groups that were a part of the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood. And this is going to take us to those scales that we talked about in the last episode of we're here at this level, then we have this soul level, and up here, and we have like all these things happening simultaneously. These groups are existing as these groups in these different levels simultaneously. And so there's like different things that have happened with them throughout time that have then created the split of like kind of how people identify with them.
Got it. Okay. So I'm with you up until this point. And so
So I have a
what,
question for you.
yeah. Mhm.
How would you describe the Freemasons?
The Freemasons. Yeah, I don't think I know a lot about them, to be honest with you, although I'm pretty sure I have family members that are Freemasons if I draw the lines back far enough. But it seems like, I think I've always associated it with something negative or something that is, yeah, going on behind the scenes that's access to this ancient wisdom. And I always wondered what that was. And I think it's the subjects that we've been talking about on this podcast and why we're building Solos out. It's this architecture that um, is like all loving and connected to source. And
Mhm.
there are creative, incredible, like incredibly deceiving um, perspectives that have been created to draw us away from that and to basically siphon our creative abilities. And we
Mhm.
we all have access to this source. And so people like groups like the Freemasons who understand this knowledge are like wielding it in a manipulative way that is beneficial for themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. And I think it's important to point out too, like not every person who's a part of the Freemasons has had this negative intention and aligned to that overall, like there's again levels to the intention. Some people join it for their own personal gain. They're not really, some people do it and they go into the far depths of harming others and whatnot. And so there are people who have been a part of the Freemasons that are aligned to neutrality and positivity. Like there's double agents that go in there, and there's all different types of kind of mixes as we kind of know that happens with these groups. So I just want to point that out because if anyone finds out that someone in their family was in the Freemasons and they're like, oh, fuck them, maybe they were in there and they were doing something that was very valuable, that was very, they were thinking of the heart of the love of the collective. So it just depends on the person. But
Sure.
overall, the Freemasons are like exactly what you said, the architecture. It's like the infrastructure and the architecture. And that's kind of what that consciousness represents. And you can even see this with what they are known for and what they are associated with, which is on their logo, it's the ruler, the 90-degree ruler, and then it has the compass above it. So they're showing that they have both 90-degree angles and then the circular angle. It's a geometry presentation saying that they master both aspects of that geometry field. And so then they master the third aspect of that geometry field because the logo's in a triangle. And so it's like, it's basically them showing why they are um, associated with architecture and with the like building of materials and the building of infrastructure. And that's really what they're connected to a lot of times is like building out organizations, building out companies, building out strategies, plans, building out all of these. It's like architecture that they are then kind of working from behind the scenes. And so it's like they're known because they have the mastery of what we would call as like the cube. It's like the mastery of the cube matrix, essentially.
Yeah. Well, and even the word mason itself, right, represents or denotes building or like I think, right? That's what I associate, like the trade of
Yes.
bricklaying, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And brick. And that's what like they're very associated with granite. And um like quarries. And it's funny because this is I didn't think this was going to take us into this lane of the quarry, which is connected to QAnon. But if you
Mm,
think of the Freemasons being in charge of architecture, they have all these different secret groups, right? It's like they've been around for hundreds of years. So they've always been recruiting people. There's families, like they're looked to when things need to happen, basically from that elite perspective, because they know how to bring that magical intention into everything. So they own a bunch of quarries where they're digging up minerals and rock and granite and materials, and then they distribute that material to construction companies, and then those construction companies are actually building the physical buildings with the materials that the Freemasons then dug up out of the earth. So
mm,
all of that is done from this magical intention that the Freemasons hold. That's why they do magical rituals, and they do because they know how to connect that source. Not the heart-centered source, but the power aspect of source. They know that if they funnel that into their building projects, then if that building is built up, then all of that energy and all of that frequency that they put into those materials is then just constructed in that building, and it's essentially a portal owned by the Freemasons.
wow. As you're speaking, I'm picturing them extracting the granite from the earth, just like they're extracting the power from the power source.
Yep.
So it's like they're taking what they need and then making that into what what it is that they want.
Definitely. Definitely. And like you think of earth as an element, as the on an elemental scale, like spiritually as well. And it's like it represents the root chakra, the red. So it's like they're, and that's the Shakti. That's where the power comes from. And so they
Mm,
are doing exactly what you said. They're coming in and taking it out so that then they could use it, because then it builds and it constructs, and then people go into that building, and the building's built to siphon their energy. So it's pulling all of their energy into the building, and then that building is connected to a larger energy grid that is connected to this service to self matrix. So it's basically like battery funnels that are
wow.
being used to then power the overall kind of service to self and luciferic matrix that they're connected into.
Mm. Okay, so should we bring in the knighthood at this time?
Yeah.
So this is the inverted example, right? So what does the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood do?
So let's actually bring in the Ruby Sun Guardians first, because we're gonna throw in a wrench. We're throwing in another name. But these Ruby Sun Guardians, and again, this is gonna connect into the root chakra, that red, the ruby color, the ruby ray. It represents the physical body, like the blueprint of the physical body. So at this galactic level, this guardian level, there's the Ruby Sun Guardians. So they incarnate, and they represent that red ray frequency in order to help preserve that physical structure of that power, that organic power. So we had these souls, the avatar souls jumping into this kind of time matrix as the Ruby Sun Guardians, and that's in like places like Lyra and Andromeda and Sirius and other things. And so that's where Atlantis then formed in certain time periods. And during these time periods, there were dragons, and there were shape-shifting dragons, and there were very large dragons, and there were dragon riders who were responsible for riding the dragons. But basically, it was at first not oriented towards war and military. It was just oriented towards like preserving the planet, because there wasn't conflict happening when we originally all incarnated. It was like we all incarnated to like preserve the cycles of time, essentially. And so that wasn't based in like mass sacrifice and blood and destruction like it is now. It was just like the ebbs and flows of time, which required preservation and maintenance in certain ways. So the dragons and the dragon riders and the families of these dragons were responsible for that. They're known as the preservers, the maintainers. They're also, they're connected to the seraphim, if anybody's ever heard of that. So they come in, these angelic dragons, these angelic golden frequency forces come in, and they incarnate as actual dragons that are metaphysical and physical. They can shift. They incarnate as the human, to whereas sometimes they'll be both the human and the dragon, and they can shift between the dragon and the human. So that's what started the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood. It was the dragon families that were basically existing and living in a state of harmony, living in a state of being together, and everyone was preserving and living together. And then that's where that parasite started entering. And I think that's why it was important, why we built all of that in the last couple episodes, because that parasite comes in, and that's where we start to get competition, and we start to get splits between the groups that were working in harmony. So that included groups that were working with the dragons and that were working as the dragons. So that began the fall. That is what's known as the fall. And so these dragon families started to descend into lower vibration. And as that happened, the beings who were running that service to self parasite turned the dissension cycles of time into war and sacrifice and destruction and mass ritual. So, because of all the conflict that then was started, that's where the knighthood essentially had to take on a military resolution type of place. And so that's where the dragon army, the dragon knighthood formed in order to be the preservers against this service to self parasite. So that's where they directly said we have to preserve life against this parasite.
Got it. Man, we've covered this a couple episodes previous, but like the idea of conflict. So at a certain point, conflict was just inevitable that
Mhm.
they had to, I don't know, resort to killing. Is that what we're talking about to be able to preserve? Was that the dilemma? Is that what they faced?
Yeah, well, I think that we still don't grasp. I guess we would still deem it as killing, because it's like at one level, when you are these dragons, you're working with a state of power that is um like, I guess it would still be considered killing, but it's not like someone with a gun, like, showing up on the battlefield and like shooting someone. It's like they're deliberately doing it with the alchemical intention and the heart-centered intention of preserving love and preserving organic life. So it's a healing process, and that healing process requires the parasite to be removed at certain stages, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So that's a good way to put it. So however that manifests, right? So it's not a
Yeah,
direct execution of somebody or something, but it is the preservation of what is good, and thereby meaning that everything that's not of that vibration falls away. And that might look like death.
correct. Yeah, correct. Perfect way to explain it.
Yeah.
And like it becomes almost like, and I am no way justifying war or anything like that. But when the power that starts, that's where the power starts working from. There's a little bit of a different process of people dying and leaving their body, right? It's like if the dragons and these beings who are part of the Dragon Knighthood know that there are, soul trapping systems, to whereas if people leave their body, souls leave their body, they could get trapped in this like recycling system. They're going to preemptively set up in the metaphysical space safety guards so that they don't get trapped, and so that they release them from their physical anchor point, and they actually have this pathway back to, a soul review type place, rather than being brought into this like recycling place. So it's so much more than just like the well, this is the worst, the last resort, and the last resort is death. that is kind of true, but it's less of a like it's more smooth like when I tune into it in the process of it. It's less of like a brute force or like a need to control and like a response. Like it's their ability to respond to the way that this parasite is acting and be able to then preserve that life in the process.
Yeah, so and responding to that from a place of connection to source, right? So it's like any a lot of the other things we've been talking about, or I've been talking about, is that when I don't know what it looks like, it's the surrender process, and then I get like, okay, it's this, like it's acting through me, and I know what to do instinctively. It's like a knowing that comes through. So here we are debating, like, what does this look like? Are we gonna have to, resort to violence or killing? It's just another example of trust of
Mhm.
source that I'll know what to do. I'm being asked to be in alignment here, and I will know when I'm supposed to know.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the basis of what the preservation aspect of the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood it is. Because at its core, it is freedom. It literally represents the frequency of freedom, the Atlantean Dragon Knighthood. And they actually are, they were represented by the colors of red, white, and blue. And their main uh, foundation was in the United States of America in that land. So we think of the colors of the flag and of red, white, and blue, and of, I think Canada also has it, and even France. It's like you can start to see how there were all these things kind of connected, but the principles of America are the principles of what the Golden Atlantis was, which was the purest frequency of freedom in its sense. So all of the preservation is preserving that freedom, preserving that sovereignty, and protecting beings in that. And so that's the devotion when the call happens with these Atlantean dragons and the knighthoods of having to make those decisions to like enact